Hello and welcome to another episode of Artist Diaries, and this week we are heading out for a lovely winter walk in January, looking for some painting inspiration. Last week we had quite a bit of snow, and I did want to try and film some of that snow so I could paint something for this series, but that just didn't happen. It ended up being a busier week last week. And by the time I had time to get outside, the snow was melting. And as you can see from this video, it's pretty much gone now. So today I just wanted to get out and go for a nice walk in the winter sunshine and make the most of being outside because I spent a lot of time cooped up last week. And so today we are on a tour of the grounds of another stately home, just having a look for any kind of painting inspiration and basically just enjoying the day out. It was really nice seeing some early signs of spring. I know we're a way off yet, there's still a couple of months of winter to go, but after the heavy snowfall last week, it was lovely to see that after that had melted away, there's signs of things coming back again and all of that life starting up. These grounds are definitely more ornamental, so I didn't do as good of a job this time of working out what all of these species were. A lot of them are non-native, but it was still really nice to see those early signs of spring and the start of blossom and new shoots coming through. It's very exciting for me at this time of year. I feel like there are two sides to winter. There's a time where things are slowing down, it's following on from autumn, and things are getting colder and harsher and darker. And then there's the other side of winter where I feel like you've turned a corner and things are changing and the nights are getting slightly lighter and things are starting to happen again. And I feel like we're definitely in that part of winter now where the tides have turned and we are starting to see that new life coming back again, and we know that spring is on the way, and I just love this time of year. And that's not to say that we won't have snow again this winter or we won't have cold spells again. There's still quite a bit of winter left to go, but for me, I just like getting over that hurdle where you feel like you've turned a corner and you know the next season's going to be spring and things are starting up again, and it's just very exciting. I really like this time and I love looking for those really early signs of spring. I saw quite a lot of birds on this trip. There were so many blackbirds just rooting around in the undergrowth. They were very active and there were loads of them. And there were plenty of corvids, which I always associate with this kind of stately home grounds. There were lots of rooks and jackdaws flying around everywhere and calling, which was really nice to hear. There was also this lovely flock of Longtail tits, which I have seen before in other episodes of Artist Diaries, but I always love trying to film them as they're flitting around above your head. I know I don't always get the best footage with my phone camera, but it's really nice just standing underneath and watching them fly around you. And if you stand there long enough, they usually get a little bit more comfortable with you, so they don't mind flying fairly nearby. And there were also other birds in this flock. There was a great tit that was really nice to see. And underneath the tree, there was also a tiny wren amongst the rocks. So it was really lovely. Robins were all over. And robins appear all through the year. They're not just a winter bird. We have them all the time. But they are still a nice winter reminder just because of them being associated with the season. So it was lovely to see so many of them. And although I did not get any good pictures of robins, they did lead me to this very lovely log, which was full of mushrooms. I'm not overly confident in identifying fungi, so I'm not sure what these are, but if you know what they are, then please leave a comment below. For me, I just really appreciated seeing them. I thought they would make a great painting subject because of the shine on the top and the way they were arranged. However, I've painted them twice before as part of Artist Diaries, so I thought I should probably look further afield this time. I actually found the painting subject for this week's video pretty early on in my walk, but the way that I like to do things is I like to take lots of pictures and lots of video footage, and then I go home and I go through it all and I decide what I'm going to paint out of everything all together. But this was a scene that I was drawn to right from the beginning, and it was this beautiful tree and this little walkway, and the reason I loved it so much was just because of the light. Like, there's a blue on that footpath which is beautiful, and the way the winter sun was hitting those trees was so nice. I was drawn to it straight away and I thought that would be the painting subject for today, and so that is what I'm going to paint. As usual, I am working on oil painting paper and I've cut this piece down to 6 by 8 inches, and I did my initial outline in raw umber just to get a very basic idea of the sketch, and then I started to block in the main colours that I could see in the picture. To do this, I tried to squint my eyes a little bit so that I could just get a rough idea of what colours were in each section. I was really conscious of not wanting to make this too detailed because I really wanted to try a slightly different technique this time just to see if I could get a little bit of the feel of the place rather than getting drawn into all the tiny details of a scene. I've been listening to podcasts of some of my favourite artists and trying to learn a few new techniques that I could put into my own work, and so I really wanted to do something different this time and not just do the exact same steps that I always take. So the things that I wanted to do differently in this was to keep that loose feel and to just try and get a sense of the place rather than put in loads of detail. I also wanted to try and push things a little bit further so that I was taking it beyond what I saw in the reference image. So I wanted to make my shadows a lot cooler. I wanted to add more blues and purples into those shadow tones rather than just painting them pretty much exactly as I saw them. I wanted to use a little bit more artistic license. I wanted to keep things a little brighter and more colourful to reflect what I actually saw on the day, because that's not always captured in the photo that you take. And I really wanted to push the bright colours that I saw on the tree where the sun was hitting it, and especially that lovely blue footpath. That was the key to me for this painting, and I really wanted to make that stand out. I think it's quite tricky when you're trying to do something new with your painting. It's difficult not to fall back into the same habits because you're so used to painting a certain way that when you're trying to do something different, you have to really concentrate. There were definitely occasions where I really had to think about what I was doing to avoid just slipping back into the same routine and painting it exactly as I would have done before. And I do feel like it can be hard sometimes to break from that routine and to try something new. You do get used to a certain way of doing things, or I know that I do. I get used to painting in a certain way and I become familiar with it, and gradually it becomes easier over time because you just know the routine and you know what the painting's going to look like at the end of it, or what steps you have to take to achieve certain effects, and so you get more proficient at it. And when you try and do something new or a little bit different, then it's kind of going back to square one because there's lots of things about painting in that way that you will be unfamiliar with, and your painting might not be as successful as a result simply because of that unfamiliarity. I guess it just feels a bit frustrating when you're trying something new and things aren't clicking or that it's not working straight away. And if your painting isn't as successful at the end, it can feel like a little bit of wasted effort. And so sometimes if I try something new and it hasn't worked, I will revert back to the way that I do things normally. But I don't really want to do that this time. I want to try something new and actually persevere with it and see what I can learn through trying a new technique. My goal with this scene was to try and paint the feel of the place without having to paint all of the details. So I wanted it to look realistic, but I didn't want to have to paint every single branch or twig or blade of grass. I guess what I'm trying to achieve is lazy realism. So I want to be able to make a scene where you really feel like it's authentic to the place, but doesn't require me to spend hours and hours putting in that meticulous detail. And for these paintings, they're only supposed to be short studies, but I also want to carry this across into any other work that I do. I'd like to make other paintings too, where you can try and achieve that sense of realism without having to paint every single detail. So you still have a painting that looks like a painting, but it also resembles what you would see out in nature. So for this painting, I didn't want to have a very strict detailed outline drawing to begin with because I thought that would be too restrictive. I wanted to block in the colours and allow the painting to just kind of grow out of those blocks rather than drawing in every leaf or every little bit of detail. I wanted to put in a vague idea of the colour and then just work on that to try and make it a little bit more refined without going too over the top with the detail. And I really had to think about this and concentrate. It wasn't something that came naturally and it took a lot of effort. So for example, in this painting, I knew that I didn't really want to put a lot of effort into the background trees. I just wanted them to be a vague colour so that you'd know that there was some foliage above mixing in with the sky, but I didn't want to draw every branch or every leaf. So with that being the plan, I decided to try not to take as much detail from the photo and put it into the painting. I tried to just get a vague idea of the colour of that block of trees. I tried to reduce the contrast so it didn't attract too much attention in the painting. And I tried to blend it nicely with the sky so that you didn't have any hard edges that would make it look more detailed than I wanted it to be. It was challenging, and there were sections of this where I don't feel like I really did that well, but I made an attempt, and that was what I was trying to do. You'll also notice that some details are creeping in here. There's a few branches that I'm adding in, and that was just kind of to test things out a little bit and see how much detail I could get away with adding and how little detail you could maybe add just to make a section look more realistic. So it's kind of trial and error, and it was to give me an idea of what might work in future paintings. Another thing I really wanted to trial out in this painting was to make sections look brighter and to add some really standout highlights. I always feel like I hold back on them, or I try and match what I see in the photo too much. But this time I really wanted to push that, and I wanted to add some pops of colour to reflect just how bright and beautiful that scene really was. I added some areas that were almost just lemon yellow without any mixture so that I could really make some sections pop. And then I tried to reduce the colour in other areas so that you could really see that contrast and you could see how bright those highlights were. Again, like the other sections, it was a little bit trial and error, but it was nice just experimenting with it and seeing what effects I could produce. For the tree on the right, I really pushed the colour a lot more than I would normally be comfortable with. I made the shadows a lot more blue, and I added a lot more red and orange into the highlights on the branches, just so that you could have that nice contrast. Normally, I stick with what I can see in the reference image and I try and colour match as best I can. But for this painting, I wanted to throw that idea out the window and just do something a bit different. And I'm really pleased that I did, because I love the end result of this. I really like the cool blue shadows. I think it makes it look so much more realistic, and that doesn't really make a huge amount of sense because I am straying from the realism of the photo. But for me, I just think it adds so much more to the painting, and I'm really glad that I pushed that and I kept those blue shadows in there. The painting of this tree was a really tricky balancing act, especially when it came to adding in additional branches and foliage in the background, because I didn't want to get caught in adding too much detail in this section, but I knew I wanted to add some extra branches in there, so it was definitely trial and error trying to figure out how I was going to put that in without it looking too messy or too unrealistic. I'm not sure I got it completely right, but I tried, and it was nice just trialing a new technique rather than reverting back to how I would do things normally. I think that creating loose paintings is sometimes an area that I struggle with because I don't always keep that loose feel across the whole painting. Sometimes I am drawn to adding detail to a section, and if I add too much detail to one piece of the painting, it makes everything else look strange in comparison. So this time I really tried to bring the painting along together so that everything fit nicely. I didn't want to have one standout section that was way more detailed than everything else. I wanted it to look like the whole piece flowed together. So that was also in my mind while I was trying to complete this painting. One of the other things that I learned from this painting, which I have learned from other small paintings in the past, is that it's really easy to make small paintings look overly detailed or too cluttered because of their size. So when I was adding in the tiny twigs and branches, although that probably wouldn't have looked that out of place on a larger piece, it did make some areas of this painting look a little bit cluttered because the branches were just a little bit too much for this scale of painting. It's something that I think is just going to come through trial and error and perseverance and practice. I'll get used to how much detail I can add into these pieces without it looking strange. But that's what these tiny paintings are all about. They're just giving me the chance to try out new ideas and techniques without having to waste a huge canvas on trying something new. So I get to practice with these small studies and figure out what works and what doesn't, and hopefully I can take that forward into more complex paintings. I feel that there's definitely room for improvement in this painting, but overall I was really happy with the end result. I was happy with the highlights on the trees, and I really like the blue on the path. I think it's taught me that if you have like one or two key features that really stand out and work really well, then the rest of your painting doesn't need to be as detailed, and it can just sit in the background. And as long as it's nice and balanced and it fits with everything else that you've painted, then you should hopefully still have a successful painting. I think besides a few finishing touches, that just about wraps this video up. I feel like I've done a lot of rambling about the painting in this video, but hopefully there's been something interesting in there. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and watching this painting come together. Please feel free to leave a comment below whether it is about this painting, or maybe you're trialing something new with your paintings and you want to share that, or perhaps you just want to share something about the winter wildlife where you are. It's lovely to have your feedback. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time.